Anyway, let me proceed to our discussants. Our first discussant is Dr. Rogier van den Brink, who has been with the World Bank since 1992 and is currently lead economist for the World Bank's Poverty Reduction and Economic Management Department of the East Asia and Pacific region, and lead economist for the Philippines. Before joining the East Asia region, he worked in various positions in the Africa region, including a senior country economist in South Africa, deputy resident representative in Zimbabwe, and special assistant to the vice presidents. Before joining the World Bank, he was a research associate at Cornell University and an associate expert with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands in Burkina Faso. He holds a PhD in agricultural economics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a master's degree in sociology. Please welcome Dr. van den Brink.
Thank you very much. I think you need some cheering up, no? And let me start, so whenever somebody mentions Dutch disease, coming from Holland, I have a right to respond, no? And it's a very good story, and it applies to what I think the moment in time you're at. So, because you all have heard about the Dutch disease, but you haven't heard about the Dutch cure. So the Dutch disease, we found natural gas. I think it was late 50s, early 60s. And we had all this wealth suddenly lying under the ground, and we were rich now. And we started spending a lot and borrowing a lot, because remember, it was there. All we had to do was to get it out of the ground. So we just borrowed ourselves. And we created this fantastic welfare state from cradle to grave. And the result was, as the exports of natural gas occurred, our currency strengthened. So the Dutch dollar became stronger and stronger and stronger. And inflation started to happen. And the labor unions were starting to scratch their heads and said, you know, what's going on here? We are on the verge of closing the Dutch shipbuilding industry. Remember, for the Dutch, if you know our history, well, you've experienced some sad parts of it here, and we were a proud seafaring nation. So shipbuilding was really something that nationally, culturally, politically, that was sort of a strategic industry of national pride. But when the situation got so bad, we had to close it down. We had a car industry, had to close it down. And at that time, the son of a carpenter was heading the labor unions. And I think he had a bachelor's degree in economics, and he started trying to understand what macroeconomically was going on. So this exchange rate is going up because of the exports of natural gas. Then these other industries that are trying to export become uncompetitive. Inflation starts to happen because there's too much spending, and he started to understand it. And then he basically started arguing with government and the private sector and said, listen, I think I understand what the issue is here. But really to resolve it, we need to get together. And to make a long negotiation story short, in 1983, a pact was signed between the labor union leader, business, and the government. And it was basically the pact asked something of everybody. So the government would stop borrowing money and spending because it was driving inflation and it was driving interest rates up. The private sector would protect jobs. So it would try to do its best to minimize the layoffs. In return, it did ask for some more flexibility in labor hiring and firing, because it was very difficult to fire anybody at the time. And a lot of the social premia, a lot of the things that were actually financing the welfare state came from taxes on labor. And labor said, listen, we understand that our wages are rising very, very fast. And we know we have to stay competitive with Germany, because that's our competitor. So we will vow that we will stay below German wages. Now, the relationship between Holland and Germany is also one you might know about. Whenever you see a soccer game between Holland and Germany, until today, it gets quite dicey. So for the labor unions to say, we will keep our wages below German wages was quite a feat. That was a coalition of people who together solved an issue at a critical juncture in the history of their country. That labor union leader, by the way, then became, his name is Wim Kok, he became the Minister of Finance to execute the pact in a sense, and later became the Prime Minister of Holland. And by the time he was done with it, the Dutch polder model was considered the most successful European economic model. But it started from being faced with a challenge together, forming a coalition, realizing that everybody had different perspectives, different interests, but again, trying to understand what needed to be done, and then forging a coalition in which everybody gave up something because they knew that in the end, everybody would be better off. And I think you're at that critical juncture now. You have, gone are the days when the economy goes up and down, there's inflation, the currency is under stress, high deficits. Gone are those days. Macroeconomic fundamentals are there now. You've seen really an increase in what economists would call the structural growth rates. And it's at this moment in time you need to get together, I think, to make sure that this continues. So, listening to the two presenters, I will focus mainly on Dr. Lim's paper, and I will say that there's a lot in that I agree with. I concur with his observation that the growth at the moment comes from investor confidence, that it comes from the remittances, from domestic consumption, and that it comes from the public investment. And these are also some of the key findings that we have produced in our economic update. Can I show the next slide? But there's really more. It used to be the case that the high economic growth in the Philippines really didn't translate into better poverty numbers. So if you look at what the economists call the elasticity of poverty with respect to economic growth, for the longest time in the years before 2013, this was basically zero. So it means that if you increase your GDP by 1%, poverty didn't seem to move. But starting in 2013, we see a different trend. And we see that trend not just in the poverty numbers, but in the creation of jobs and in the trends in underemployment. So for instance, on the left you see that graph. You see the job creation of over 500,000 has been sustained for the past 5 quarters. A bit earlier, 1 million year-on-year jobs created from April 2014 to January 2015. And despite the impact of Yolanda and the high-rise crisis, poverty fell by 2.2% from 2012 to 2014. The increase between 2012 and 2013 was a bit higher, and it's true that Yolanda and the rice price increase in 2014 reduced it, but the net impact is still a drop in poverty from 2.1 by 2.1%. The APIS and FIRE surveys that were mentioned, they are perfectly comparable when it comes to the income module. They share the same income module, and at the national level, they are representative. The little correction that was made to the numbers that were in the SONA was basically because Leite was in one survey and out in the other. And you can now see on the website basically the poverty estimates with Leite included and with Leite excluded. So no mistakes were made, but just different ways of coming to the same number. We also see the improvement in the poverty incidence supported by higher growth of real income and lower underemployment among poorer households. So here you see in the middle, you see the percentage point decrease in underemployment for the bottom 30% from July 2012 to 2013. You see percent change in first half household incomes from 2012 to 2013. We don't have the full data for 2014 yet, but for 2013 you can see it. And the bottom 20%, the darker graphs, consistently show higher growth than the top 80%. Domestic transfers are figure very prominently there. That's the social protection transfers. That is, part of that is the CCT program. And if you look at this graph, it looks as though the targeting of the CCT is pretty well done. We've done, I think, 2 impact evaluations of the CCT program, and consistently the program targets quite well. Next. Now, if you look at these numbers, so both your quite high growth numbers and this change in the direction of this economic growth, the direction has become more inclusive. If you start playing around with that, you see that if you take a low per capita growth scenario, 4.2%, that's our medium-term projection. And if you use the old elasticity, the one that pertained to the period 2000-2012, remember the period where I said basically, even if you increased growth, poverty didn't really go down. You use that old one, you'll see that, you know, it's very difficult to reach the poverty target of the government that it set itself for 2016, which was 18 to 20%. But if you look at the very high elasticity, the minus 2.2% that happened between 2012 and 2013, you can see that it can be realized, and at 1.5 it can still be realized. It's just at 1, which is sort of the more recent one, you have difficulty reaching it. If you do have higher growth, so per capita growth rates of 5.7%, you can reach the government's poverty goals basically at the current elasticity at which growth reduces poverty. So you keep sort of a medium-term growth forecast, and you keep this sort of trend in the way that growth reduces poverty, you can achieve these goals. Next. So with the combination of the high growth elasticity, or reasonably, because it's in the empirical realm of what you've done, and this high growth, I call growth of 5% or 6% high, by the way. So I'm from Holland, we have never grown at 6%, ever. So the fact that you can grow at 5 or 6%, you're in the top league in the world. So if you hear a lot of, gnashing teeth when the growth goes down from 6.8 to 6.3, don't worry too much. It's very, very high. Yeah. For instance, if you sustain growth of 6% per year, that doubles per capita income within a decade. Doubles. 5 times in 20 years. 11 times in 3 decades. If you continue this growth rate, this elasticity, you can do this. Poverty can be eradicated within 1 generation. But for that, these reforms that have been building up, macroeconomically under the previous government, focused on governance under this government, if you keep this up, you can achieve those. And we've put that, the same story I told to you in the previous slide, we've put that in the left slide. But to do that, this sort of coalition that I started with includes the academe here, the journalists, the labor unions, the private sector. You have to think hard about how you can work together to make this happen. And that's the sort of critical juncture that Acemoglu and Robinson wrote about in their book, Why Nations Fail. And I would submit to you, you're at that critical juncture. Make good use of it. Thank you.